Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Front Page Fitness. This is episode number 15. I'm still Eric Trexler. I'm still joined by the good Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple, the Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple. Lauren, how are we doing tonight?
The one and only.
My mistake. Yeah, a lot of people have been commenting that my introductions aren't quite respectful enough for you, so I will try to make a note of that and improve it moving forward.
Well, it's literally the only time you are respectful and complimentary during our episodes, so that tracks.
Yes. All right, Lauren, how are we doing?
So we're doing well. We've had an interesting week. It's been an interesting time per usual on the gram, and there's a lot of tomfoolery.
Yeah.
And so I've had what could be a brilliant business idea, and now that I'm going to share it with you and all the listeners, I'm sure someone else will steal it and I will no longer profit from the brilliant business idea. But I was thinking that if we could have an app or even a website that would be like grifter tracker, I need to workshop the name, but grift alert. And you could just copy and paste their website or their Instagram profile, and it could be like a Wikipedia crowdsourced type thing that then says, should I trust this person or not? And we need it direly.
Interesting. Yeah. Or alternatively, we could have an app called Grifter, where we would probably take out the E and just do grift with an R at the end. That seems to be how a lot of apps do it. And basically, it's kind of like the Tinder or the Grindr for grifts, where basically you kind of put your interests in and you swipe along, and we just match you up with the grifter who reinforces your biases to the maximal extent. So it's like, I want to be enchanted by somebody's grift. Match me up with the grift that's closest to my interests. So we could kind of play both sides. Like, some people want to be protected from the grifters. Other people just want to be along for the ride. And so I say we might as well capture both audiences.
Yes. I mean, your idea is toxic, but I'm here for it. I was thinking more like grift detector vibes, but I agree. Both avenues make sense.
Listen, from what I see on the internet, people seem to be very happy falling into these grifts. No one seems to be kicking and screaming on their way in. So that's all I'm saying is give the people what they want. Clearly, these things are an absolute blast because everybody loves a good carnivore grift. You name it, fill in the blank.
I had an interesting exchange on the gram yesterday because Sue Davis, who is an endocrinologist and a professor in Australia at Monash University, she put out a post about testosterone. And so testosterone therapy in perimenopause is a very hot topic because it's, we know about estrogen-based therapies, but, what about testosterone? And there's a lot of people in the grift or grift adjacent community that are promoting testosterone very, very prematurely for cognitive health, muscle, bone, and the evidence really isn't there to support it. And so that's why all of the menopause societies only recommend it for low libido. And there's evidence there that says, in like 50-60% of women, it might help with low libido. So that's really only what it's indicated for. And her point was, listen, I've done over 20 clinical trials on testosterone in women. And what we see over the lifespan is testosterone declines, very, very slowly, but starting at age 18. And then at about 60, it starts to increase. And her example was, that's probably why your grandma had some chin hair or some baldness. But there isn't anything about the menopause transition, which, average age 50, 51, that we would see some jump that would require, intervention, or that would set the alarm bells off like, oh, testosterone is suddenly a problem. And this is really what we talked about before with, muscle loss, with decline in metabolic rate and these other kind of claims that are going around in this space. And the response was interesting and unfortunate, because it was very much like, you're not listening to women, you're not promoting the growth of women's health, because you're saying, oh, we need to wait for the data, when, if you have something that could potentially help women, give it to us. Why wouldn't you do that? These other people who are recommending it are helping us, and how dare you gatekeep?
Yeah.
uh
What's the worst that could happen when you take whatever dose of testosterone you feel is appropriate without any data guiding that? It maybe issues with long-term heart disease risk, maybe masculinizing effects, but why would you gatekeep all that fun? Just make it a big mystery box. Let no data guide the way, Lauren.
Well, and not only that, but when we think about all the BS that, so it's like, all right, you need to be on at least 7 supplements. You need to be on estrogen-based therapy. We're going to toss in the testosterone therapy. We're going to give you a GLP-1, because why not? And then who knows what's working? Who knows what you're having an adverse reaction to? And it's just interesting and you see other people in the comments say, oh, well, it's part of my MHT regimen and I'm doing great. It's like, okay, that doesn't mean it's doing anything. And it's just like such a disconnect from not only just evidence-based practice, but logic from my perspective.
Yeah.
And the lack of acknowledgement for, hey, so if you have that attitude, should we just release drugs of all kinds to the public and say, like, well, it worked in rats. Well, it worked in my trial of 20 people. Like, have at it. I mean, that would be crazy.
Yeah.
And for some reason,
So out of curiosity, can you tell me a little more? So testosterone, I've written about it before, but always through the lens of the biological male. Especially because in the fitness world, a lot of guys are wondering, is my testosterone too low? Is it high? Should I take steroids? If I did, what would that actually do to my testosterone levels? All those kinds of questions. So like with the male testosterone reference range, I have those numbers kind of burned into my head. I have a decent understanding of, the physiological changes throughout that spectrum. But with female testosterone levels across the lifespan, what are we really talking about here? And what are we talking about in terms of dosage when people are taking, testosterone for women during and after menopause?
well, there really isn't the doses that people are recommending, kind of, there isn't a standardized recommendation, which is part of the problem. But the primary issue is, and this is not only for testosterone, this is actually for all hormones with menopause therapy, they're not treating to blood levels, right? So you're treating symptoms. And so it's not about, and that's why the community has moved away from the term hormone replacement and transition to the term like menopause hormone therapy, because it's not about trying to get you back up to a certain level. It's about using the hormone to address a particular symptom. And for the case of testosterone, like I said, it's really only been widely approved to potentially be effective for low libido. And so it would be starting very low and then kind of increasing as needed to improve symptoms without the downsides of those negative side effects that you mentioned. And the same would go if you're on an estrogen-based therapy. It's not about, what is your current level and let's try to match that. Because frankly, I mean, with estrogen levels, given they're constantly fluctuating throughout your menstrual cycle and then even more erratically in the menopause transition, what level are we trying to treat to? Is it the peak? Of course not. That's not appropriate. But then if they are at some point, incredibly low or at peak levels, and there's this massive range in the middle, then it doesn't make sense to treat to a particular blood level. And it's further complicated from the testosterone perspective, whereby you have some people who will their actual blood levels won't change at all in response to therapy. And so it doesn't really make sense to treat it in that way. But it makes it that much more complicated because people think about it in that lens of replacement. And so I need to get back to X.
Yeah.
And I understand why they think that, because that has sort of been the way that men have approached it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking through some estimates here of kind of the reference range for the biological female, and it looks like we're talking about, depending on where you look at which source, something in the range of 15 to like 50 or 15 to 70 nanograms per deciliter. And it looks like what I'm seeing at first glance for, menopause, what is it? MHT, menopause hormone therapy. Is that the preferred term? It looks like this guide I'm looking at is suggesting starting out around 5 milligrams per day. So that would be 35 milligrams per week. So that's interesting. For context, the male reference range is usually from about 300 to about 1,000. Some charts go up to 1,100 nanograms per deciliter. And male testosterone therapy often kind of works up to about a 200 milligram per week dosage. And then when people go on steroids trying to get as big as possible, the kind of cliche dose you hear about is a gram a week. So 1,000 milligrams a week of testosterone. So that's just to kind of like help people get their bearings of what the heck we're talking about here in terms of reference ranges and dosages that are being used out there. But, 35 is nothing to sneeze at. 35 milligrams a week is, that's not nothing. So I would echo you mentioned the post was kind of like, hey, we should probably like wait around and, see what kind of data we have before we kind of dive into this head first. I definitely would tread lightly before going into, taking any exogenous hormone. Just because, there's some things that testosterone does in the body that cannot be undone. Like they are essentially permanent morphological changes if the dose is high enough. So that's kind of not it's not the kind of thing that you want to do it and then change course once you identify you've caused a problem. Because some of the stuff that happens with testosterone, if you push it too aggressively, you can't really undo it. Which is it'd be very unfortunate to basically be assuming the risk of some unfavorable, irreversible changes without having essentially informed consent of like what exactly is going to go on here. And I think that's kind of my biggest worry is if we're seeing a normalization of diving into this therapy and embracing that kind of perspective, Lauren, where it's like, who's got time to wait around for evidence-based practice to inform where we're going with this? What that implies to me is that there's at least a few practitioners out there who are probably going really just flying by the seat of their pants and saying, what kind of square wants to wait around for clinical trials to really guide the way here? Which is generally not what you want for the person who's managing some pretty critical endocrine cascades in your body. So, very unfortunate that was the response, was to treat the person who actually does clinical trials in the area as if they're being a stick in the mud, so to speak. And I think that alone kind of tells us where we're at in that space, where it's like, it's so bullish, to borrow like an investing term. Just people want to go all in very quickly on anything that appears to sound promising, which, like when you are a hobbyist, doing something that is relatively trivial in nature, you're just like, hey, I like to follow the next shiny thing and have fun with it. Like, Yeah, that's fine for certain like hobbies and endeavors, but not with medical practice, not with your health.
Yeah.
So you really don't want to be jumping onto bandwagons and trends. And you certainly, when someone tells you like, "Hey, I'm not really convinced that we have enough data to guide that therapy in a very targeted and effective manner," um, you don't want to immediately turn it into some kind of like, why don't you like women conversation? Because you could argue a person who really cares about their female patients is the one who says, I don't feel comfortable pushing you into this kind of therapy recklessly without knowing exactly where it's going to lead.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the sentiment is, well, just lie to your doctor and tell them that you have low libido because, again, they're keeping this from you and you're going to get all these other benefits. So if you just go in and you say, I have low libido and I'd really like to explore testosterone therapy, then, it will be clinically indicated. And so you should all do that because they're keeping this from you, this thing that could be extremely beneficial.
Yeah, that brings me to another generalizable point. Do not lie to your doctor. Uh, that is a bad practice. And because the thing is, like, when you get into the game of frequently lying to your doctor, unless you too are a doctor, um, it turns out when doctors are asking you questions, it's usually for a reason, and there's stuff that they may do with that information. So, like, there are many cases where if you are not forthcoming with your doctor about medications you might be using that they're not aware of, or supplements you may be using that they're not aware of, or if you're embarrassed about using something that you haven't been prescribed, but you've been getting it through some other means, what they're most often doing is not making value judgments about you and joking in the lunchroom about what you're doing. They're trying to make sure that they don't like prescribe you something that's going to fatally interact with what you're doing or cause you severe adverse effects. So I really can't stress this enough. Like, there's some things that are considered really benign in the like health and fitness world that like you got to tell your doctor that you're doing it. And like some things as simple as like fish oil. Like fish oil changes if you're taking especially if you're taking a fairly substantial dose, it can impact blood clotting time. And so if you're going into surgery where there's going to be a lot of tissue disruption and a lot of blood loss, if you just throw your surgeon a curveball and say, by the way, psych, I've been taking super high doses of fish oil up to the day of surgery, that is not going to be, they're not going to be happy. You're going to lose a lot of blood, and that could be a big problem. So that's just my general, now that I'm at an advanced age, I just give little nuggets of wisdom as I go throughout the day. That's one for today. Be extremely transparent with your doctor because they're trying to. I know this is going to sound crazy, Lauren, in 2025. Your doctor is trying to safeguard your health. They're actually not trying to keep you sick, which is something you see on the internet. They're not trying to uh, play goalkeeper and prevent you from having a good time. They're not trying to keep fun, cool, innovative, and effective treatments away from you, as this conversation has suggested. So, all that is to say, when it comes to healthcare, I get it. Like I do want to be I do want to be fair here. Like when you are dealing with any kind of side effect, adverse effect, negative health ramification, negative health symptom, and it is really negatively impacting your life, I totally understand why there is an impulse and a tendency to kind of say, I'm going to go hit a subreddit and see what people are doing and see what kind of things are getting people to some kind of resolution. Because, I've talked to people who have, really persistent, totally idiopathic pain issues, totally persistent idiopathic sleep issues, libido issue. I mean, you name it. There are so many elements of our lives that when they're askew and out of whack, and we're experiencing some kind of symptoms that impair that. It's so disruptive and so it's just an unpleasant way to live. So I understand why people would get together and be like, oh, their doctor's getting them results, mine isn't getting me results. My doctor's an idiot, or they don't listen to me, they don't care about me, they're not good at their job, they don't want to do their job for whatever reason. I totally get all of that, but The thing that I found over time, Lauren, you know me, I was dealing with a very hard to diagnose pain condition for 7 years of persistent symptoms. So believe me, I reached the whole spectrum of these people are idiots. These people won't listen when I tell them what's going on. They're not keeping an open mind for less common diagnoses. Uh, you name it. And I even got to the point where I just stopped seeking care until then the symptoms, you'll never believe this, got worse and worse and worse. And I was, okay, I can't live like this. So
Yeah.
eventually it was a happy story. Finally, actually Jason Yor, who is a physical therapist, he jumped into my DMs. It's like, bro, I think this is what you have. And he ended up setting me straight. But I do want to kind of acknowledge, like, sometimes it can take third and fourth and fifth opinions. And, healthcare can be a very frustrating thing no matter where you are. All these different healthcare systems have their pros and cons. Most of I don't talk to that many people who just say categorically, unequivocally, my country, perfect healthcare. I love everything about it. There's always pros and cons. I get that it can be frustrating, and that's why you see this tendency to band together and say, hey guys, let's crowdsource this. What do we got to do? What do we got to say? What do we got to get? But man, that's really not an ideal way to go about managing your healthcare. You have to be a very persistent advocate for yourself when it comes to seeking treatment for health issues. But you really got to hesitate from saying, I have diagnosed everything. I know exactly what it is. I know exactly what treatment we should pursue. I know exactly the dosage we should do. And now I just need one of these dummies to give it to me. So I'll say whatever I need to make that happen. That is something that can go wrong more often than it can go right.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of these cases, it's actually, there isn't anything wrong. There's just this sort of perceived benefit that one might get from taking this thing. And so that's where we're going with it. So
Yeah.
you're not even treating anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Lauren, what's your take on this? So, it sounds like testosterone therapy, when indicated based on clinical presentation and a clinician speaking with a person about their symptoms and how things are going, it sounds like it may be clinically indicated in the context of low libido. Is that during and after menopause or just across the board?
Yeah, so uh, typically it's post-menopausal women that are seeking it for that purpose,
Yeah.
and those interventions, those trials have been conducted in those populations. But there are other ways to go about it too. So, and as I mentioned earlier, it seems to be effective in about half of the
Mm.
people that try it. So it's certainly not a sure thing, and you definitely need to weigh the pros and cons because it's not appropriate for everybody. The same way that any sort of hormone therapy isn't going to be appropriate for everybody, but there are, importantly, there are clinical trials that are underway. And so we need to wait before we start saying, oh, but there was this one tiny pilot study, even though these other pilot studies showed nothing. And
Yeah.
that's really what's happening. It's kind of a cherry picking situation. And using this to me is kind of using science for I don't want to say evil, that's dramatic, but
Pure
it's
evil.
not an appropriate representation of the science to date. And I think that's the frustration that people have as well. It's like, well, okay, we don't know everything right now. You have to be patient. And that's not an answer that sits well with people.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I'd be really interested in, I've never seen this kind of work done in the female population. But I'd be curious to see long term if it's like, hey, we followed up with this group of women who were on this low dose exogenous testosterone to treat libido. We did like a 12-week trial or whatever, and then we followed up a year later. And for people who were prescribed it, just kind of checked in to see who's still taking it. Because I
Right.
think that is one of the things that is most surprising about testosterone, hormone. I don't know if I forget what the preferred term is these days. They say they don't want to call it hormone replacement.
Just call it hormone therapy.
Yeah, hormone therapy with exogenous testosterone. I get endocrinologists all over my back every time I use the wrong nomenclature there. But there have been studies where they follow up and they say, okay, these people started using, these are people who were clinically diagnosed with hypogonadism, so low testosterone. They started taking it, and then they follow up like a year later, and they find like in one study, I think it was 85% of the men in the trial just stopped taking it. And it's not because they were having all sorts of severe adverse effects. They were just kind of disappointed. They were
Yeah.
just like, oh, I honestly thought that if my testosterone increased from 250 to 550, I'd feel like a whole new man. And frankly, I didn't. And it was kind of annoying. And some people don't like needles, and other people, frankly, it is like kind of worry. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but there can be negative ramifications of using steroid creams because we touch people. Like there's more than a few instances of scenarios where a person uses a topical testosterone cream and unfortunately, unknowingly delivers a dose of testosterone to members in their family over sometimes extended periods of time. Like people just have close skin to skin contact. So all that is to say, with testosterone, with hormone therapy, Lauren, in males, what they've found in many studies is that a lot of people go into it with fairly high hopes. And right now there's a lot of hype about it out there among men. And they walk away from it saying, is that really it? Because I really expected a lot more. So that is one thing to keep in mind, is that I would expect that a lot of the folks who are maybe twisting the arm of their clinician to get prescribed this, they may have that kind of honeymoon period where, I mean, a thing about libido, I'm not saying it's completely psychological or all in your head, but it is something that can't, you could certainly kind of placebo yourself and say, yeah, I think I do feel a little boost of libido. Like it's one of those things that is very susceptible to that. But I'd be very curious to see 12 months later who is still saying like, oh my God, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm never going back. Because in the male data, we see that really doesn't tend to be the case with hormone therapy.
Well, yeah, and if we're going to be honest, maybe it's depression, right? And
Mm.
testosterone isn't going to help with that. Or maybe it's relationship dissatisfaction, and the hormones aren't going to be the solution for that. And so when you think about that type of question, it's multifactorial and could be addressed in a variety of ways. And so I think we as humans tend to want to reach for the easiest or perceived easiest solution, or one-stop shop, quick fix, whatever. But it just might be more complicated than that in order to actually address the root of the problem.
Yeah. And in the interest of protecting you from individuals on the internet, I will acknowledge, just for the sake of being comprehensive, I am aware of at least some papers that kind of link testosterone levels with depression symptom scores to some extent. But to your point, no clinician is going to say, wow, it sounds like you have very severe depression, and so what we're going to do is give you a lot of testosterone. I think that is not the treatment for depression. There are some kind of cross-sectional associations that have been noted. The direction of causation, who knows? But I just wanted, I'm sure some people would point out, hey, it's not that there's never been any hint of a link between the two, but certainly no one would suggest that, high dose hormone replacement therapy is a primary, secondary, or tertiary treatment for depression. All right, Lauren, anything more on that topic, or shall we move on?
Let's move on.
Let's talk about, speaking of just embracing the testosterone just pulsing through your veins. The quote here is, I am reclaiming thigh freedom for the dads. To me, this is just dudes being dudes, getting the thighs out and embracing all that it is to be a man with presumably pasty thighs. So this leads to, what is this? Today.com, an article. This is so odd. There's like a section. It almost looks like there's like like in the newspaper, there's like the sports section, the business section, whatever. It almost, the way this is formatted, makes it look like there's just a dads section. Is
It
that
does
right?
look like that.
I'm going to click on that link. Is there a dads section, or is that just a keyword? I need to do some more research on that. But the headline is, One Man's Quest to Normalize Speedos for Dads. Now, Lauren, before you tell us what happened here, I want to share a brief anecdote. There was a time in my life, many, many years ago, long before I met my wife, when I dated someone from Brazil. And there had been some discussions about maybe taking a trip to Brazil and going to the beach and all that. And I was wearing, I had been to the pool with this person, and they're like, but we have to talk about your bathing suit, your swimming attire. I said, what do you mean? I wear, board shorts cut above the knee, fairly in style at the time. She's like, yeah, I can't bring you around Brazil wearing that. Like so I was educated on the need for Speedo or Speedo adjacent swimming attire in certain parts of the world. Luckily, that has not become the norm in North Carolina because I just don't think anyone needs that at this point in time. But Lauren, take it away. What are we looking at here?
Well, this was kind of a weird one, if we're being honest. But
Sure.
he's saying that this dad wants to normalize things for his daughter because he's a man, and so he wants to normalize things that are more associated with women, like cleaning the house and expressing his feelings and prioritizing skincare and wearing a skimpy bathing suit.
You had me up until the end. I I just don't really see the line of logic there. Um, yeah, man, that lost me at the end. That was a hard turn. Um, I'm pretty baffled. So I like the general premise, I suppose, of normalizing. Man, I'm baffled by that. So how do you feel about this? Instead of me just stammering.
Well, I mean, the other point he made was, there's if you want to move through water without resistance, and you need to wear a more appropriate suit, and I would I can get on board with that, I suppose, if we're talking about competitive swimming. But this is a dad that's at the beach with his young daughters wearing a floral speedo that matches their bikinis. And so I don't know how much performance oriented swimming they're doing as a family. Maybe we could follow up, but um uh, I don't know that we should be normalizing women wearing skimpy bathing suits. I don't know that that is like an empowering thing for us to do as a society.
I think that's the curveball that got me. After stammering and then listening to you talk, I feel like I'm finally prepared to put words to the chaotic thoughts that were rambling around my brain. Full disclosure, I don't sleep much these days. I do take caffeine by the gram, so I'm struggling cognitively, but this is the quote that finally helped me solidify my thoughts. It says, "Why are women expected to wear barely there suits? I'm talking full-on thongs at the children's water park, while men get mocked for wearing form-fitting ones." The moral of the story there isn't that everyone should be expected to wear very skimpy bathing suits. The moral of the story is you should not feel pressured from a societal perspective to wear skimpy bathing suits. So that is why I was like, you've led me up to this like line of logic with the initial stuff, and then when it got to, hey, now we're all pressured into wearing skimpy bathing suits. That's where you lose me. So I'm not a father, Lauren. I
No.
do have two cats. I think I do as good a job as anyone
A
raising
feline father, if you will.
raising my two kittens. So I'm not going to speak as far as how people ought to be fathers. But I feel like in my ideal world, what I would probably say is, I think, despite the peer pressure that you might be experiencing, I think you should wear what you feel comfortable with. And maybe that's not skimpy, you know? And not to say that I'd be, policing everything my daughter wore. I'd hope I wouldn't. But that would, to me, be the takeaway is, hey, there is a variety of swimsuits that we see on offer here. Why don't you pick the one that you feel best in? That would be Eric's parenting advice for tonight. How do you feel about that?
Well,
not I wouldn't traumatize my daughter by me walking around in a speedo because I like I said about the trip to Brazil in that speculation of what I would do. I just don't think anyone needs that. I put the world through enough of that when I was a competitive bodybuilder. No one was asking for more.
Yeah, well, this story did receive some backlash from another journalist or maybe a news host who basically said yes that this was on the news, and she basically said no one wants to see your thighs, that's gross, don't wear a speedo. And they had a kind of a back and forth because the dad felt body shamed. um but, she said no one wants to see your hairy man thighs. But I think
Wow.
if I can take a fair look at this, the point it shouldn't be how everyone else sees you or what everyone else is thinking when they look at you. So to that extent, I would agree with you. Wear whatever you're comfortable in. But of course, societal pressures and stuff. It's not cool to wear this. It's cool to wear that. Everyone's going to stare at you. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
I
but
just don't know why this made the news.
yeah, I was gonna say this is not new, right? The idea of saying, you know what, for the first time in history, I think I'm going to wear a, a piece of clothing or attire that bucks the norm. I think I'm going to be the first one to intentionally wear something out of style to make a statement. That essentially is fashion in a sentence for human history. The idea of intentionally wearing something that bucks the norm, bucks the trend, is not congruent with the current style, is a tale as old as time. And frankly, I think this article kind of overstates, to be totally honest, how not normal it is to wear like a Speedo or a Speedo adjacent swimsuit. Like, Lauren, if you were out at a pool and you saw someone wearing a Speedo, I feel like I wouldn't be that jarred by it or even really comment on it. Am I out? Am I crazy there? I feel like it's not all that odd to see either men wearing a Speedo or a swimsuit that is like very, very tight and has like virtually no leg to it, right? Like a super, super high cut pair of shorts, basically. Like that doesn't seem all that unusual to me.
I just feel like the fact that they have nothing else to talk about on the Today Show and in the New York Post and wherever the original article was posted, we got to do better, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think to me, and the joke's on us because we are also talking about it. I just want to,
That's
I want to
true, but I mean,
blame you for that. But
okay, I apologize.
here's the thing: if you want to like kind of normalize something and say, hey, we're gonna kind of bring this into the fold of what is considered kind of the norm and acceptable, the idea of doing it loudly is always just such a like look at me kind of move. Like, hey, I want to talk to today.com about the swimsuit I'm wearing. It just seems so disingenuous. Like, if you really want to normalize it, the whole idea is to not make a huge deal about it. It's not like, hey, everyone call the newspaper. I'm about to wear a Speedo today. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Ultimately inconsequential. Wear whatever you want. But wear it, frankly, here's me being grumpy, wear it quietly. That's all I want in life, Lauren. I just want to be left alone.
Yeah.
All right. Ooh, we have a Shirtless Moron Award. That is what I'm seeing in the outline. I don't know if I accidentally said the quiet part out loud. Is that too toxic for the way you want to introduce this?
No, this is a shirtless moron.
Okay.
This ruined my week. His entire profile is him being a shirtless moron. And not only is he shirtless and a moron, he's doing it in the grocery store.
Yeah.
So it begs the question, so he goes in and then he says, yeah, Greek yogurt is the worst thing for you for whatever reason, right? Never eat eggs. Chicken is terrible for you. You need to eat ground beef instead. And then, throwing out words like mitochondria and DNA completely out of context. And making major health claims while shirtless in the grocery store. And he should be removed and banned from all grocery stores. Don't all grocery stores require shirts?
I would
I don't
think
know.
so. Shirts and shoes, I believe, are typically the norm. Um, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I see stuff like this, Lauren, and it, like, listen, I'm not aggrieved or upset about the fact that this level of content is being made. Like, I can live with that. That's a pill I don't want to swallow, but can. What I can't really abide is the fact that, like, this person has like a large following. And so there are
Hmm.
people who are clicking on this, and it's basically him just walking around saying, like, and I can't stress how accurately I'm retelling this, but he's saying, like, look at this. This is Greek yogurt. Do you think you're going to get shredded eating Greek yogurt? You're dumb. And that's the full totality of the depth, the context, and the explanation is just, this will not make you shredded. If you think it will, guess what? Hate to say it, you're an idiot. I just can't understand who is watching this and in what mindset, where they're like, are they rage watching so they can go and say, you're an idiot? I don't like this. Are they watching because they're like, yeah, what a bunch of idiots eating Greek yogurt? Like, who's getting a kick out of that? I just can't wrap my head around the idea that this has any kind of entertainment value, educational value, or cultural purchase. And it really, this is the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. I can live with knowing a person did this. I cannot live with the 15,000 likes per video. That is the part that actually makes me feel a not negligible amount of what I would call despair.
I am fine with content that's not educational and just entertainment, whether it's, we're making fun of other people in the fitness industry. If it was some sort of satire for entertainment purposes, then I would be less offended. But you're getting no value out of this,
Yeah, that's what I
and
mean. Yeah.
it's not funny. And it's
See, that's the
and
part.
he's being rude to you. Like, do we all like somebody being like, you're a moron?
Yeah, that's the part that gets me. It's not that I'm saying, like, hey, the world should be a dry and boring place where everything is just morsels of information. But if you want to do satire, do satire. If you want to do comedy, do comedy. If you want to do other forms of mindless entertainment, mindlessly entertain me. But for this particular genre, I just can't see a redeemable quality. And the fact that there is like a fairly substantial viewing audience for this really concerns me. It's not that I'm like, why does this person get to have an audience? Why do they get the big microphone? I'm fine with all that. I'm just like, why is there an audience for this? And what does that say? Like, what are we going to do, Lauren? How are we going to make it?
We're
Yeah.
doomed.
I
Help.
I think that is where my despair comes from, is just from a meta perspective. What in the world are we going to do? And what does life look like in 10 years if we continue down this treacherous road? I don't know. By the way, I'm getting another surgery soon. I may not be here in 10 years. Like the last couple years for me, Lauren, things are really going downhill. So you should frankly start thinking about who would be a good co-host. That's all I'm going to say about that. I have a hernia that needs to be surgically repaired. And from what I can tell and from clearly how I'm responding, it may be fatal. I don't know.
They usually are.
Yeah, I hear,
Everybody knows that.
well, I've been led to believe it's a coin flip. So that's not terrible. There's been worse. But anyway,
Mm.
yeah, I'm just a big ball of despair over this Shirtless Moron Award. So I feel like the headline almost makes it seem like it's going to be funny. Maybe we're going to get more people who are just like leaning to make all their decisions in life. But this one hit me on a very deep level, unfortunately.
Yeah, the leaning one we could laugh about. This one, I just want to punch the guy in the face.
Yeah, I
I'm
didn't
just
say that. I am I'm not going down that road. But if you want to, I support you. Okay, so Lauren, let's talk to the young people here. Presumably every person who's liking and watching those videos is below the age of 20. Please, Lauren, that has to be the case. If not, I'm really going to have like a crisis here. So let's assume that to keep me on track and keep me happy. We
Okay.
got an email from Joey, and the headline is Teens are trying to bulk up on protein supplements. What should parents watch for? And we got a link here from NPR. So what's going on here? My intuition tells me this is either a very informative article about how to select reputable protein brands with high quality products, or it could be perhaps a little bit of misguided scaremongering about the classic, oh my God, my teenager ate protein. What am I going to do? So which one do we have here?
Unfortunately, this is very skewed to, there is such thing as too much protein and some really untrue claims about kidney and liver damage. And so I'm sad to see those being perpetuated at this point when we do know that unless you have existing health issues, just eating a high protein diet is not going to harm your kidneys or your liver. And so we need to kind of move away from that, especially when we know that there are so many benefits to eating a higher protein diet. But I think the interesting thing about this conversation is this focus in younger and younger people on supplements. Um, and so it's not so much a protein in and of itself. Great, let's all prioritize it. It's never too early to start. But there is a sense of like, oh, you should be giving your kids protein shakes. You should be giving your kids creatine. Are there other supplements that could help them in, their middle school or high school athletic performance? And that, I think, we start to get down a bit of a slippery slope of like, are we going too far on pressuring them to do things that are like not going to be game changers? And what kind of habits are we instilling early on, and are they good or bad?
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I'm looking through this article. It's I don't know, man. I have like surprisingly outsized feelings about this. I think it's just because I haven't slept lately. I feel like every segment tonight, I'm saying like, wow, I'm surprised by how strongly I feel. But anyway, so with this one, they're kind of opening with a story, right? So, uh, Emiliano is the protagonist, a 17-year-old, and he joined the high school football team as a freshman, and at the urging of coaches and teammates, started hitting the gym, and in the course of that, started to take an interest in strategies for bulking up, saw people taking protein powders, things like that, and said, maybe I'll get into that. And that really is kind of the story of what gave me everything in my life. my my career, my hobbies, my passions, my interests, most of my social circle. Um, and so one of the things that makes me feel so odd about this is that there's kind of like a happy ending, it seems, from skimming this article at the end, where the last the last few sentences, like Emiliano stopped using protein powders about a year ago. And his father, Eduardo, says his son still looks very strong and fit, but is no longer fixated on bulking up for sports. He's focusing on getting into college. And I don't know, it makes me so uneasy to see that, like, the other version of this is like Emiliano started lifting for football, took an interest in how his body responded to exercise and nutrition, really took an interest in his diet, pursued a career in dietetics, now lives happily with 2 kids in a family, and has been practicing nutrition, and he helps the elderly stay strong and fit into their 90s. And I kind of resent the way that the article is framed as if they pulled him out of the underbelly. Like he was messing around with some bad folks, right? They were doing, you name the narcotic, he was into it. But
They're snorting protein on the
we
streets.
got him back on track, and we think he's got a future ahead of him. He may even go to college. Like, I don't know. I feel really conflicted about that. Having said that, I do think that one of the things, and this kind of segues into another headline that we have on the outline, which will probably do it for tonight for us. But one thing I did selectively skim over because I'm not a trustworthy person is the quote from the protagonist here, they would take protein powders, other supplements, like some people I know take ashwagandha, maybe creatine. Um, and so the other stuff, that is an area where also my story led. When I was a young teenage guy who's just getting into this stuff, no idea what I'm doing. I'm 15 years old. I would see these different supplements and say, oh man, I wonder if that works. I wonder if that thing works. And I
Yeah.
do think, luckily I didn't have the economic resources to actually follow up on all those whims. And supplements back in that at that time, we're talking 2004-ish, 2005-ish. Yeah, the supplement store would be well stocked, but if you were on a budget, you'd basically get your protein. Pre-workout supplements were brand new. They were like the new class of supplements, so everybody was into them. But essentially, you were taking protein, arginine, and caffeine. Like that was pretty much what you were taking. One thing that is worth noting, though, is that the supplement world in the year, it has gone through ebbs and flows where there actually has been some nasty stuff on the market that's been affordable. And that is the kind of thing where we actually do need to reach out and educate parents and young people. So the thing that sucks about it is like, we do not need another article saying like, I don't know, maybe if you have too many protein shakes, your kidneys and liver are going to shut down. Because if you have healthy kidneys and a healthy liver, they won't. We've got studies with astronomically high protein intakes with no adverse effects on liver and kidney function. But what we really do need is more articles saying, let's talk a little bit about the history of the supplement industry. And let's talk a little bit about the kind of the tells and the trends that are kind of omnipresent. Because every time there's a little shakeup in the supplement industry, once you learn the history, you say, this is literally the same thing as last time. Like, we just changed the characters and changed the ingredients. And so I wish we had a little bit more, big time public facing content about that stuff, about, what are not the dangers of protein and creatine, but the actual dangers and the actual unknowns about the new thing on the market. And some of the common ones back in the day, Lauren, there was the pro-hormone craze, which they were not pro-hormones. Those were just oral anabolics. Like, that's all they were. And the one thing that's true about oral anabolics, basically, it's steroids, but you take them in pill form, your liver, couple enzymatic things happen, things change, and all of a sudden you got an active steroid in your system. Those things are brutal for your liver. They are terrible. And it really is true that in the early to mid 2000s, there were pill bottles that kids could get over the counter at just about any supplement store that genuinely were way worse than if the people just sold them testosterone in a vial and some syringes. It would have been dramatically healthier to just put that kid on injectable steroids 10 times out of 10. Like, no one would legitimately argue against that perspective. So like there have been, there's the pro-hormone phase. There was the phase where people were putting in a bunch of wacky stimulants that are not legally considered dietary supplement ingredients. They don't meet the criteria. And if you don't meet those criteria, you need to go through rigorous testing protocols to get approved and brought to market. That never happened. So there's all just these wacky stimulants, and we don't really know. It didn't know then, still really don't know the exact health ramifications.
What was like the caffeine, ephedrine, aspirin, was it?
You're thinking of the ECA stack, right?
Yeah.
It was ephedra or ephedrine, caffeine, and
I want to say
was the A aspirin?
I want to say it was aspirin, and I
Yeah.
don't know why that would have been.
Yeah,
I feel like that was
Google
the
that.
thing.
But so there ephedra and ephedrine. So ephedra had ephedrine alkaloids in it. But that was big on the market for a while. And then there were some cardiac events, and that got pulled from the market. But yeah, for a time I think
That's still legal in Canada. They sell it at every supplement store.
even with the ephedrine alkaloids in it.
Yeah, it's just straight up
Huh.
ephedrine.
Man, look at that. Yeah, because now there's some kind of watered down ephedra products that you can find in a lot of places, but they don't actually contain the active alkaloids that essentially both made it work and made it likely to cause adverse events. But but yeah, that's, I think I actually
Like
did.
you can get ephedrine
Yeah.
hydrochloride in pill form at a supplement
I
store.
do remember,
Anyway.
yeah, now that you bring that up, I remember looking back in the day at differences between like America, Canada, Australia, UK. And there were a lot of instances where like there are some places where you could go get like just straight up ephedrine, the hard stuff, and you could not get melatonin. like and I was like, what in the world? Like, because you can honestly take like, most people take a melatonin dose in the like 1 to 5 gram range, but there have been some experimental studies where like they're like, yeah, we're gonna give people like 20 grams of melatonin and see what happens, and the answer is like kind of not much. So like it's kind of crazy to me that melatonin is actually banned in some of it's not available over the counter. You have to get prescribed it. And New Zealand actually just changed that. I was talking to Helms the other day. It's been a long time that you could not get it over the counter, and they just made a change to the regulation status there. So finally, New Zealand joining us in the 21st century here. But anyway,
The A is aspirin for the
okay,
record, but
yeah,
yeah,
interesting.
weird times.
Yeah,
But going back to our article, one of the things that I found troubling was the equating protein powder to other supplements, because
yes,
it really shouldn't be. I don't really think of protein powder as a supplement. I think of it more as just, a substitute for other forms of dietary protein. And so there's a quote in here from this pediatrician and eating disorder expert who's saying that, like, kind of grouping together supplements and protein powders, protein bars, and saying that, eating disorders are on the rise, and the protein craze is contributing to it, and that people have really unrealistic expectations of muscularity, and that that's a problem. And I don't see how avoiding protein is really helping with that, because frankly, of course, if you're talking about putting kids on a ton of unnecessary supplements, or going even further and starting to dabble in the performance enhancing drugs, we need to stay away from that. But lifting weights and eating sufficient protein and seeing, the level of muscle and strength gains that you can get from that is a good thing and something we should be encouraging. So I just think this article really missed the mark.
yeah, I agree. It's like you said, we really don't need to be making that false equivalency. If nothing else, convince yourself that you're doing the environment a favor when you use whey protein, because you kind of are. Whey is, a byproduct, kind of a waste product, so to speak, of the process of making cheese. So there's a lot of cheesemakers that have all this whey left over after they've made their cheese, and they're like, we don't really know what to do with this. If they just dump it, it's actually terrible for the local environment. So they try to like feed some of it to livestock, and the rest they're like trying to figure out ways to make plastic with it and things like that. But there's literally a lot of people who are just trying to get rid of whey in a way that doesn't harm the environment. So it actually is quite a beautiful coincidence that it turns out to be an extremely high quality protein product from a dietary perspective. But I agree, yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at, though, is that like there is plenty we could do to educate people about the supplement industry, its history, its trends, to help them kind of spot things that actually might be like worth skipping, and if you wanted to take like a super easy heuristic, like something that is marketed to have a dramatic impact on your testosterone level, a great example.
On anything.
Well, yeah, but a great example is like back in the day, they would market these products they would literally name them as if they were like the name of a steroid compound, like the same nomenclature and suffixes and things like that. And so like, yeah, if it's like, I'm afraid I'm going to actually use a real product name, because there's only so much you can do with these different word forms. But like it's always,
There are protein bars, I don't know if you've seen them, called Anabar.
yeah, a protein bar. I'll give them a pass because it's just a protein bar. But it'll be like something that like claims to be a a test booster, and it'll be like androbolic, decabolic, like actually using like
Yeah.
steroid names in nomenclature. And it's like, yeah, are you really stunned when they do third-party testing and they're like, did you know there's actually an anabolic substance in this? Like, yeah, I kind of got that. That they begged me to understand that that was the case. Um, you know, any kind of, pre-workout there was some that like literally would allude to the fact that they were like methamphetamine or crack cocaine. They would like use that in the branding. And it's like, yeah, if they tell you like this stimulant is going to change your life and you're going to be like, you're going to feel like you're actually on crack cocaine. Yeah, they might be using a banned stimulant in that because caffeine generally doesn't get you there. So there's telltale signs. And it brings me to the final thing I want to mention here, which is that there are some herbal supplements that several of them actually have been tied to liver issues. And a lot of it has to do with people taking way too much. A lot of it has to do with very, very poor quality control. And it is kind of difficult for some of these low budget supplement companies to try to like totally standardize their extracts from these herbal products. And so what you'll see is that the dose that was supposed to be 5 milligrams of active ingredients sometimes is literally undetectable, zero point 0. And sometimes it's 200 instead of 5 because they're just kind of like, they really don't know what they're doing in a lot of these kind of low budget operations. And so the link that you had in the outlines says, woman says NBC News report made her recognize liver damage from turmeric pills. And what a shameless NBC News giving themselves a shout out for their prior reporting, helping this woman. So yeah, it's an NBC News article about how NBC News totally called it and saved a woman's life. But this is not all that unusual. There have been many herbal ingredients where people have like presented, and you can read all the case studies, you can read all the litigation about it. But, some of these herbal ingredients where people show up at a hospital and they're like, hi, my eyes are turning yellow and I don't know why. And they ask a lot of questions. And when they cease taking the questionable supplement, all of a sudden their liver function goes back to normal. They're no longer jaundiced and life is good again. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add about that particular study or that particular headline, I should say. But it is like, I think the most important thing we can do when talking about supplements is be legit, be straightforward, be transparent, and say like, there's a lot of people who want to go one side or the other and just say all supplements are bad or all supplements are good. The reality is the nature of the supplement industry, it's not unregulated, but it is poorly regulated. Meaning there are regulations on the books. There's no question about who is authorized to enforce that regulation, but the scope of the industry relative to the resources of the enforcement agencies leads to a very big mismatch where it is an extremely uninteresting game of cat and mouse. The mouse is like 7 acres away and the cat is still kind of chasing it based, I guess, on scent, but it is nowhere within paw's reach. And so that is kind of the nature of how oversight works within the supplement industry. Is we know what the rules are, we know who enforces them. It's just they're just very hard to enforce. You can imagine like playing a game of whack-a-mole on like expert level 100, where there's just moles everywhere, just really bad products everywhere, and you only have one mallet to swing. So it is very important to be clear that I'll talk until I'm blue in the face about how protein supplements, as long as they're manufactured well from a reputable company, they're really a terrific addition to the diet if you're struggling to get enough protein. Creatine supplements, again, the creatine supplements, you really don't hear about major manufacturing issues with them because it's a cheap ingredient, relatively speaking, and super easy to produce and get out there. So creatine, generally a very safe bet. Protein powder is generally a very safe bet. When you start getting into some of these kind of niche herbal remedies and things like that, listen, it is a situation where buyers have to be really, the onus falls on them. The burden falls on them to do their homework about what dosage is appropriate, and is this manufacturer reputable, and do they have high quality control standards? And in many cases, that information is not easy to come by, which is why I'm not the type of person who tells people, yeah, go take every herbal ingredient in the book and, let's roll the dice and see what we get.
Yeah, I'll just add that specifically with the turmeric curcumin supplement realm, there is a really, really underwhelming body of literature to support its use for anything. And there are an alarming number of reported cases of liver failure from that supplement, and it's unclear if it's due to companies trying to kind of tweak the formulation or delivery such that they're more bioavailable, but there's even a product called Nutrafol, which is, if you listen to a lot of podcasts, they sponsor most of them, and this is a hair loss supplement, or a hair growth supplement.
Yeah, you
And
don't find a lot of hair loss supplements.
right.
Yeah.
Well, a supplement for those experiencing hair
Yeah.
loss. Anyway,
we should try. Maybe that's an untapped market. Like, listen, you start taking this, you will lose all your hair.
I'm sick of shaving my head.
Doesn't matter where it's from. All of it gone. No more eyebrows. No more eyelashes. Yeah.
So, yeah, laser hair removal in powder form. But that supplement has like 20 ingredients, and so it's criticized because it's like, well, what the hell is working in this thing? This is an oral supplement, but one of the ingredients is turmeric, and it's interesting that the reports worldwide of liver issues from the turmeric curcumin world, and also reports from this Nutrafol, which contains turmeric, it's a bit of a red flag. And again, if it were a supplement that was really well studied and showed to be incredibly effective, then we'd say, oh, we really need to think this through, right? But in reality, we don't think it's actually doing very much. And if the risk is even a little bit higher than nothing, then that's a good enough reason to skip it, in my opinion.
And are you familiar with any reports of liver damage specifically from that product, or it just contains turmeric, which has been linked to a lot of those reports?
No, I'm from that product.
Really?
Specifically.
Wow.
Yes.
I was not aware of this. What kind of
and when we look like worldwide, there are in some countries hundreds, and in others 10, 20, 30 reports of liver injury that have been attributed to turmeric supplementation. And there are some very outspoken people about Nutrafol. And that's been kind of out in the media, and I don't think they've ever addressed it publicly, but if you are having an issue with hair loss and you'd like to address it, there are ways to do that don't require a multi-ingredient supplement that may or may not be beneficial and is potentially harmful. And so, get an appointment with a dermatologist. There are, prescription grades, either topical or orally ingested products that can work for hair growth. And I think, unfortunately, in this era of supplement pushing, it's not only that there might be something inherently wrong with this supplement or this ingredient, or inherently, injury promoting potentially. Maybe this is just a more dangerous substance than others. But it's also compounded with the fact that if everybody is taking 15 different supplements, guess where that's going? Guess where it needs to be processed?
Yeah.
So, we need to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, that is one of the big issues with supplements, is that supplement use is, people who use supplements. And so we see a lot of what in the medical world you would call polypharmacy, right? So it's not just, I'm going to begin taking a supplement and that'll be it. It's the stacking of multiple supplement products. And yeah, sometimes you may not even know that this product A that I take and product B, they're both these multi-ingredient blends. They actually contain the same herbal ingredient, which may be linked to potential liver issues at high doses. And you may not even know you're taking any of it if you haven't read the labels closely, or you may be taking twice as much as you thought. So yeah.
Or their proprietary blend, so you don't even know what's in it exactly.
Yeah, it seems like that's coming back. Back in the day, like people used to bash on proprietary blends so hard. I thought that they would just go away from economic forces, but I think people laid off the gas pedal a little bit, and they're making a comeback. I don't know. I've been out of the supplement consumer game for a minute. I haven't been doing a whole lot of supplement purchasing outside of protein and creatine. I feel unconnected.
I'm not a big.
And it sucks. Like to me, that was part of the fun when I was getting into lifting, was trying all the new different pre-workouts and pretending they were different.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it's good that I'm no longer wasting the money doing all that. But yeah, I'm totally out of touch with the supplement trends. That's for sure. I don't know. I feel like just as a social commentary, I feel like the world is so fragmented right now in terms of there's no like monoculture for entertainment anymore. Like it used to be, there's 3 channels, everybody watches the same television, then talks about it at the water cooler. You're talking about how all the podcasts are advertising the supplement. Never heard of it in my life. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, like very, very many.
No.
So it just always stuns me when I get those reminders that like every person around me in my life essentially engages in a different pop culture and society than I do, which is a very odd thing. I don't know if I'll ever fully wrap my head around the ramifications of that, but yeah, I have no idea what kind of entertainment you're being tapped into out there, but it's fundamentally incompatible with mine. You need to listen to more college football podcasts. That's ultimately the point.
Well, there is a paper published in the American Journal of Gastroenterology.
I'm looking at it right now.
Nutrafol's hair gains and liver strains.
Yeah, that's a interestingly like a lot of levity for that title.
A little bit.
Yeah, for like, oh yeah,
it's just a case report. I mean, like I'm not trying to overblow this. It's just there's enough kind of circulating around that when you say, okay, there's 100 cases of in Australia and 20 cases in Italy, and then we also see it with this hair growth supplement, you just have to wonder. And I'm not a fear monger, but again, if there's no reason to be taking it in the first place, then let's just not. Because even if all of these are attributable to something else, which is possible for sure, the benefits still don't outweigh the potential risks, however small, at least again, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it is like, you look at this case study, I've seen, not with this specific product, but this is kind of like, a lot of times they'll write the case study this way and they'll be like, well, given, normal liver enzymes 1 month prior to initiating the supplement, followed by development of jaundice and stark elevation of liver enzymes after 5 months of use, then stopping using it and everything going back to normal, we're starting to think that the supplement had something to do with it. Which, yeah, it's
decent.
That is fair, but
decent hypothesis.
I have to bring this up before we close out here. There was one hilarious case report that people point to, and they say, like, have you ever heard that creatine increases muscle damage and then like risk for rhabdomyolysis?
No.
So back in the day, a lot of people would make that claim, and they even had a PubMed link to back it up, Lauren. And so there was a study, I believe it was in the early 2000s, where they're like, listen, this guy, strapping young man, I think he was like, maybe a football player or something, but, someone who works out, fit, muscular. This person presented to the emergency room and had rhabdomyolysis. And they're like, well, he has been taking creatine. So a lot of people point to that as like a risk factor. But what they don't mention was that the person skied directly into a tree and had like very severe crush injuries, and then had surgery
Yeah.
on said injuries from skiing into the tree and had a surgical procedure that is very highly associated with cases of rhabdomyolysis. And so they're like, okay, so this man crushed his body into a tree, then had surgery, and also takes creatine. What do we think caused the rhabdomyolysis and the extensive muscle damage that we're observing? And they're like, I don't know, probably the creatine. Who's to say? So I would say if you are on creatine or if you aren't on creatine, do not ski into a tree.
Wise words.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, Lauren, I think that does it for tonight. Anything you want to tell the good people before we go?
Thank you for sending me hilarious and sometimes upsetting videos, excellent emails. We are slowly pulling from them. We have quite the long list, but I appreciate you making my life easier by sending me headlines so I don't have to just read the New York Post all day. No offense to the New York Post. Shout out.
No offense. I'm sure they don't take any. Yeah, so folks, if you want to reach us, frontpagefitnesspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us. Make sure you like, rate, subscribe, review, share with a friend. 5-star reviews are generally preferable, and we will be back in 7 days with another episode.